Good morning and welcome to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. You can join me right here on this station every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. to bring you, the Pennsylvania landowner, the valuable information that you need regarding natural gas development. At the Clark Law Firm, my focus and my representation is dedicated to Pennsylvania landowners, oil and gas right owners, and only landowner and gas right owner representation. As you hear me say, and it's true, I tell you, I do not, have not, and will not represent oil and gas companies. I represent landowners across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and even across the country who have, and even in other countries, who have property or gas rights located in Pennsylvania. I represent landowners for such items as gas lease negotiations, gas lease modifications, extensions, amendments, royalty issues, royalty deduction issues, estate planning, pipelines. You hear me say, I've done pipelines, negotiated, worked on pipelines, on agreements with over 60 now, different companies in Pennsylvania. Also, unitization issues, surface use agreements, well pads, meter sites, compressor stations, really anything whatsoever related to natural gas development here in Pennsylvania. You can always give us a call, 570-307-0702. No matter where you're located, very comfortable that we can help you out. And remember, whether you call me or call somebody else, stop simply signing documents presented to you by the company landman without getting your own assistance, without somebody who is going to educate you, who's going to represent your interests, not the company's interest. You don't want to have somebody who's employed, independent contractor, or working for the company to represent, assist you, to educate you on issues that you need to know from the landowner side. And I think I'm going to give you a couple really great examples of that here today. But before I do, I'm going to give you this reminder. And I know it's a distance for some people it's in their backyard. But as you probably know if you listen, I'm doing a seminar and it's coming. It is this Wednesday, June 15th, from 6 to 8 p.m. It's free, but for landowners only. If you work for, whether directly, independent contractor, whatever the case may be, any oil and gas company, landman, land service company, unfortunately, gentlemen, ladies, you're not invited. This is for pre-registered landowners only. So I want to remind everybody, man, this is exciting stuff. This is funny. I mean it. I've been saying this. We will shut down registration when we have a full capacity. We do have a limited capacity. And as of today, we only have 20 spots left. 20 spots left. So please understand, if you show up on the day of the seminar, which is this Wednesday, 6 to 8 p.m. at the Dean Center in Wellsboro, Pennsylvania in Tioga County, if you show up Wednesday and you're not pre-registered, unfortunately, you will not be able to attend. You must pre-register. Now, I know it's kind of funny. I feel like I'm a carnival guy or something, but I'm telling you, it's the truth. We're doing it free. It's going to be great information, but we've had outstanding feedback from other seminars. We have had outstanding feedback and pre-registration for this coming seminar. And again, there are only 20 spots left. It's first come, first serve, meaning, well, I should say, first register, first come to the seminar. So if you do not register, you will not be able to attend the seminar this Wednesday at the Dean Center in downtown Wellsboro. Also, once we hit our maximum capacity, because we are limited in space, we're going to stop registration. So if you're sitting there thinking, oh, I'll register on the last day or I'll just show up, I'm sorry. But number one, if you show up, you're not going to be able to attend if you have not pre-registered. And if you attempt to pre-register once we get 20 more spots filled, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to attend because we have to cut it off because we only have so much space. So again, I'm not trying to be some big sales guy here, but it's the truth. We only have 20 spots left. So if you want to register, pre-register, and attend, you have to pre-register. You have to be a landowner. We verify, we check. You must contact the office, 570-307-0702. That's 570-307-0702. Sound like an infomercial. Do not delay, but it's the truth. We are filling up fast, and we're hoping to be at 100% capacity before this Wednesday when the seminar is. Again, Wednesday, June 15th, 6 to 8 p.m. at the Dean Center. Call 570-307-0702 to register. If you call over the weekend, leave your name and number, and we will get back to you and verify your registration, and we'll see you Wednesday. Very excited about it. Been working on my preparation, and can't wait to get out there. I love doing the seminars, and I can't wait to sit down, stand up, talk with the people out in the Tioga County area. And of course, regardless of where you're from, as long as you're a Pennsylvania landowner and do not work for a company, land service company, and are not a landman, you can attend. Again, 570-307-0702 is your number to call to register. All right. You are listening to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm, and we're going to go ahead and jump into the substance. I talked earlier, as I talk quite often, a couple things. Stop simply signing documents. Stop doing it. Get assistance. Stop relying solely on the company landman to advise you, because the company landman works for the company, does not work for you. They have a job to do. We have a job to do to protect our property, to protect ourselves, to protect our kids, to protect our future generations, to maximize financial compensation. That's your job as a landowner. Or if you want to decline, to simply decline the offer. But how can you maximize your position if you don't truly know your position? And how can you identify and understand all the positions that you should be looking at, or all the factors and all the terms that you should be looking at and the things you should be considering by relying on an individual who is working for the company that you're negotiating against? So here's some examples. I think this is pretty good examples here. And this should give you a pretty good idea of the fact that maybe the company isn't sharing with you all the information that you should be considering when you're asked to sign a document. And I'm going to tell you, that's elementary. It's elementary. It's elementary. Okay, so what I did here, in the last couple weeks, I got letters from clients that they received from an oil and gas company, landman, or even employee, who sent the landowners documents and requested that they sign the documents, have them notarized, and returned back to the company. As I say to all of my clients, all of the clients who I've represented and now, or they've moved on, and really to everybody, look, don't sign documents. Stop just signing. Get assistance. So whenever when you're presented with documents, or you receive something in the mail and saying, hey, here, sign this, notarize it, red flags should be popping up all over, and return it back. Okay, do you know everything you need to know when you're asked that? Well, let's look at a couple things here. Okay, I'm not gonna give names here, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna paraphrase and read from some of these a couple letters. So here's letter 1 from the first company. So company says to the landowner, requesting, the title of the correspondence is a request to receive the landowner's consent or permission to reform or change the size of a production unit. Now, it gets much complicated. It's a real simple thing. Hey, we want to make a unit bigger. Well, that may seem simple, but there's often much more behind the scenes. much more that you need to be thinking about and you need to be evaluating and considering when making a decision. So in this correspondence, we have correspondence 1, requesting a modification of a lease in order to allow for a larger unit. Now that may seem relatively simple, but I assure you it is not. And what do I mean by that? Okay, let's get into it. So, interesting. It's not addressed to Dear Mr. Clark or Dear Mr. Landowner or Mrs. Landowner, whoever it may be. It's addressed to, I thought this was very funny, to whom it may concern. To whom it may concern. So you're being asked by the company to make a significant change to your lease, and the company hasn't even identified you in the correspondence as a particular individual, but just, hey, to whom it may concern. So I liken a lot of times to fishing. You throw out enough lines and maybe you catch a fish. So to whom it may concern. In order for the company, and I'm going to say company instead of the name, to more efficiently develop the gas production unit in your immediate vicinity, the company needs to amend your unit, which includes a portion of your property. Due to technological advancements in the oil and gas industry, the company is able to drill and complete longer lateral wells, or well laterals, which are able to capture gas over a larger area while reducing a well's environmental footprint. Well, that sounds great. Okay, hey, that's great. Great, we got technological advances. We got smaller footprint. That sounds great. Let's keep reading on. Well, yeah, they know that sounds good, so that's, of course, why it's there. Then it goes on. The current configuration of your unit does not allow for the longer, more efficient laterals. Therefore, the company is proposing to reform the unit. Please see the attached consent to reform unit and associated maps. I like that. With the maps setting forth the proposed revisions. The maps illustrate the current units in your area and the new proposed amended units. Okay. At your earliest convenience, please sign and notarize the consent to reform unit and remit back to the company using the enclosed returned envelope. Boy, isn't that nice? Here's what we want you to sign. Here's a couple maps. Go ahead, have it notarized. Go ahead, get out there, get it notarized. And we've given you the courtesy of having this returned envelope, so you don't have to spend that 50 cents or whatever that amount's going to be. Goes on to say thank you for your consideration in this matter. Should you have any questions, please feel free to call me or email me. Please also know that we have notaries available in our local office. So, okay, I'm going to tell you, you read that and say, wow, okay, hey, sounds like they want to do something environmentally, have less of a footprint, technological advances. Well, this sounds great. Okay, well, where do I sign? Well, I got to go get it notarized. Oh, I don't even have to pay any money to send it back. They gave me a self-addressed envelope. Boy, aren't they nice. Well, let me tell you, you dive into these maps. You dive into the drilling permits. You dive into what wells have been drilled. You dive into the location of your property in the current existing unit. You dive into how much property you would have in the new units that they're going to create if you sign this consent to reform the unit, and other people do as well. There is so much to look into here, and I'm going to talk about why certain landowners, if you sign this, you make a tremendous mistake. Some landowners, it actually may make sense to sign, but others, it would be a total disaster. And I'm going to explain why and what I mean by that when I get back after this break. But before I go to break, I want to remind you that you're listening to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm, and you can catch me right here on this station every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. to bring you, the landowner, the information that you need regarding natural gas development. I'll be right back. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. I have a lot to get through, so I'm going to jump right in here. Okay, so I'm talking about a couple letters that clients recently received, sent to my office. We did a review, a consultation, got to the bottom of it, and were able to identify exactly what was the best decision for the client to make in their particular circumstances. And surprisingly, it may not have been as the company requests. Hey, here's some documentation. It's going to be great. Sign here and return it back and we'll be all good. And plus, we gave you a self-addressed stamped envelope. Well, as we dive into it, it's not so easy, not so clear. So in the first example, we're going to do a couple little case studies, if you will. So the first example, I read paraphrased the letter from a company to the landowner saying, hey, we want you to agree and sign this consent to reform or change the unit. Well, once you get into, then we look at, all right, well, what does this consent to reform the unit mean? And again, there were maps that were enclosed showing roughly where the initial configuration of the unit was or is, and what they anticipate the new unit or units would look like in the future. So that's good because that gives us something to study, look at, understand, and aid the landowner, the informed, educated landowner, and their informed, experienced, and educated attorney to evaluate and make the right decision for their circumstance. And in this particular case, I'm sure that there were, oh boy, at least, I'll be very conservative and say at least 20 landowners, I suspect, received this document, this letter, and these maps because they would be impacted by this request, but actually I suspect it's many more. So included in this letter and with the maps is the actual document, the consent to reform unit. Let me tell you, unless you have some legal training, I have a feeling it's going to be a bit confusing. But some things certainly that you can understand, and I'm going to, again, jump around here, but I'm going to read some of this document. So it goes through, it identifies the parties, the people, what's involved, and then it says here, and this should give you, again, some serious reason for pause and hesitation and recognizing that you need to look into this. Here it goes. So it says, whereas lessor and lessee, being landowner and company, desire to amend the unit. Goes on to state that it's to encourage additional development by including new lands or leases or portions thereof in the unit, meaning the existing unit, and removing other lands or leases or portions thereof from the unit. So, okay, think about this. Hey, we want you to sign this. We want to change the unit. By changing the unit, we're going to add more acreage, other leases, other property into the existing unit, and we're going to take out acreage that is in the current unit. Think about that. If you have all of your property in the current unit, and I'm just using that as an example, you could have half your property, but if you have your property in the current unit and you sign this document, that property, all of it or part of it, may be removed from the unit. So to go to a real possible example, say you have 50 acres. And again, this is just an example for illustration. If you have 50 acres in the unit, you sign and say you're getting royalties. Say there's 2 or 3 wells drilled into the unit. You're getting royalties. You're really happy. Things are going pretty well. You wish the gas price was higher. We all do. But still, you're getting royalties. You've been getting royalties. You're completely unitized. Life is pretty good. The only thing we need is higher gas prices, but we believe they're going to be coming. So what do? We look at the maps. We look at what they're proposing and what they're presenting. But I'll tell you, if you have all your property in a unit and there's a well or multiple wells drilled in the unit, what is the reason that you may agree to amend the unit if you could lose all or part of your property from that unit? Meaning that if you sign this amendment to the unit, if you sign this consent to reform unit, you better darn well understand these maps, understand this document, because it is completely possible that by signing this document, you could end up having all or part of your property that is currently in a unit that you're currently getting royalties for taken out or removed from that unit. So you sign this. You say, oh, hey, great. Looks like they're doing some good things here. Where do I sign? Stick it in the envelope, send it back to them. Okay, sounds good. Say 5-6 months later, you don't get a royalty check. You say, what's going on here? Call the company. Hey, company, just checking in. I've been getting regular royalty checks. This month I didn't. Just want to inquire what's up. Company says, well, landowner, remember that consent to reform unit you signed? Well, that kicked in. We changed and reconfigured the unit. We added more property into the existing unit, and we took some out. And yes, by the way, your property that was in the existing unit has been removed. So although those wells are still producing and people are still getting royalties, you're not. Because of the consent to reform unit, we took you out of the unit. But hey, landowner, no, don't fret, don't worry. We're going to create new units. We're going to include you in those units. And you say, well, okay, this is not good. Have you drilled in these new units? No, we haven't yet. Well, my old unit had 2 or 3 wells in it. How many are you planning to drill right away in the new unit? Well, we're still working on the plans. We're not planning on drilling for another year or 2. We're planning on drilling 2 or 3 wells, but that's always subject to change. Let me tell you, you probably got yourself a bad situation that you're not very pleased that you got yourself into. And the truth of the matter is, you're not going to be able to go back in time. And unfortunately, if you simply sign a document that's sent in the mail to you, and especially, any document, but then when they ask you to notarize the document, it's an important document. They're all important documents. But when you do that and you don't consult with anybody, or, you call the company and they explain to you why they want to do this, you sign it, you send it back, and then you find out, by signing that document, I now no longer am going to get royalties. Well, I'm promised royalties in the future. I'm not sure how long it's going to take, but I just signed a document that had me removed from a unit that led to me being removed from a unit in which I was getting royalties. I'm going to tell you, that was a screw up. And it's a screw up that could have been prevented by calling, having a review consultation, whether me or somebody else, but somebody who knows what they're doing. Somebody who knows what they're doing. Whether you call me, call anyone, you ask them, what is your experience? Have you seen this before? Do you understand this? Do you understand all the aspects of this? Ask those questions of your representative, because these are big issues. So you could have went to a lawyer. A lawyer said, that looks good. Go ahead and sign it, and end up in the same boat. You need to get assistance. You need to get high quality, credible, experienced assistance by somebody who's going to help and work for you. Whether me or somebody else, get that person. You're listening to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. I'm here with you every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. to bring you, the landowner, the information that you need regarding natural gas development. So, I want to circle back here because I'm talking about, you simply get these letters and, they sound great. You sign it, you return it back. And I just gave you an example for illustration of how, in some circumstances, you could sign what you're asked to be signed and end up signing yourself out of royalties that you're already getting. And you may have a promise for future royalties, But right now you're getting royalties. And maybe in my example, you're getting from 2 or 3 wells. So maybe in the future you get royalties, but maybe you only get maybe it's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years into the future. Maybe it's even only 1 year into the future. But there's a good chance it may be longer. And with identifying what you need to look at and understand, you can get some idea of what may happen in the future to allow and to help guide you to make the right decision. But you have to dive into this with the knowledge of what you need to be looking at in order to make the right decision. A wrong decision can be extremely costly. So when a company says, oh, yeah, hey, here's great, we're going to sign this, it's going to be great, you say, all right, that sounds good, and they gave me a self-addressed stamped envelope for great convenience for me. I'll go ahead, sign it, have it notarized, sent back, and now you got a big problem. However, remember I said that they enclosed maps in this correspondence. So you can look, and maybe you have, and this is why I say too, every case is specific. You have to get specific advice for you. And what do I mean by that? When you look at the maps in this particular case, there are several parcels or landowners, landowners who own parcels, where clearly signing this document could be or would be to their benefit. So what do I mean? If you are completely unitized in the current unit, and when they send you the maps and they show you, so let's say you have 50 acres. So if you currently have 50 acres in an existing, and we'll say it's a 500-acre unit. So you have 50 acres in a 500-acre unit. They're showing you what they intend and how they intend to modify, what parcels they're looking at removing from the producing unit, what parcels they may be adding to a producing unit. You look and you see, well, with a new configuration, if this consent is signed by me and all other people that need to sign it, if it's signed, then I will still have 50 acres in the unit. And when I look at this, the new unit that they're planning, instead of being 500 acres, say, let's give the example that it'll shrink and it'll only be 450 acres. Again, this is just a hypothetical for illustration, but this is a very, very real type of example. So, okay, let me reset that because it gets confusing. So, okay, you look at the maps as a landowner. You say, I have 50 acres right now in a 500-acre unit, and there are 3 wells producing gas that I get royalties from. Under the plan to change the units, they're going to shrink the unit from 500 acres to 450 acres. And when they do, I will still have all 50 acres in the unit. So now I will have 50 acres in a unit with 3 wells producing, and the unit is only 450 acres, where it used to be 500. That seems like, and it probably is, a really good deal for that particular landowner. That landowner calls me, we look it up, we study it all, we look at the wells, we look at the drilling, and we say, hey, you know what? This seems very clear. You're going to want to sign it. However, not everybody is in the same boat, obviously. And there are other people, and I'm going to talk about this in the next segment, there are other people who they should rip this thing up and run away from it as fast as possible. And I'm going to explain what I mean about that in the next segment. You're listening to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. I'm here with you every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. on this station. If you missed any of today's show, go tomorrow, pagasleaseattorney.com, pipelineattorney.com. Today's show will be up and available tomorrow, as are hours and hours and hours of prior shows. Have been doing All Things Marcellus since 2010, closing in on our 6th year anniversary here in August. So keep listening, and I'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm, here with you every Sunday, 8 to 9 a.m. on this station. And jumping right back into it here, what we're talking about overall is when companies send you a letter and say, here, sign this, return it back, and thank you. You need to take a step back and make sure you understand what you're signing, but what you should do is get assistance by a knowledgeable, experienced oil and gas attorney who can assist you evaluate what you're asked to sign, what you're being asked to sign, and then help you make the right decision for you and your circumstance. If you are just signing, stop signing. If you are just signing, stop signing. Get assistance. This is a great example. You get this letter, you say, oh, okay, hey, this sounds good. Where do I sign? You sign it, you send it back. I talked earlier, you could literally, in certain instances, be signing so that you're currently getting royalties, and by signing a document like this, you could end up be signing yourself out of royalties. Really, this is not exaggerating here. It absolutely could occur. Or maybe you're not signing yourself completely out of royalties, but maybe now you're getting royalties on 50 acres, and after you sign, maybe you're going to get royalties on 30 acres, maybe 40, maybe 10, maybe 20. Who knows? Well, I'll tell you what, you better figure that out and don't just sign. So in the last segment, I was talking about this is specific evaluations that you must undertake. What do I mean? Well, I gave an example where a 50-acre landowner who's currently has all 50 acres in a producing unit with 3 wells, and in the new configuration, that same landowner would still have their same 50 acres in a unit with 3 wells, and that unit would actually be smaller in size. That sounds like a good deal for that landowner. But the same exact document sent possibly literally to my first example to that landowner's neighbor may be a totally different evaluation. What do I mean by that? Well, maybe that next landowner, he or she has, we'll stick with easy numbers, say they have 50 acres in the currently existing unit. But if they sign the modification or sign a consent to reform the unit, the plan is to modify the unit so that that person that did have 50 acres in the original unit now may only have 10 acres in the unit. And the other 40 would literally be removed from the unit with the promise to be placed into another unit in the future. But it's not a guarantee, and you're going to end up, instead of getting royalties from your 50 acres, now you're going to be getting them, I think I said from 10 acres in an example, but it could have been 20. So you're losing royalties almost instantly, or once this kicks in. Then on top of that, your 30 acres, we'll say 20 acres, we're going to stay in the unit. 30 are going to come out. Well, that other 30, now again, you're not getting royalties for that. So you just cut your royalties down by 60% by signing this document. Well, I shouldn't say cut them down. You just lost 60% of what you were getting in royalties. Then what happens is you're waiting for this property to be placed into the new unit, and you were used to get royalties on this, all in 3 wells. You were doing great. Now it's removed. You're waiting for the new unit. We don't know when that new unit is going to be formed. You also, in my example, there's been no drilling on the new unit. You don't know when drilling is going to occur. That could be 2, 3, 4, 5 years into the future. Who knows? It could even be longer. Also, when the new unit is developed, maybe the company only drills 1 well in the new unit. So in that scenario, you had 30 acres that you were getting royalties from by 3 different wells. But by signing a document, by not asking questions, by not understanding your circumstances, that 30 acres in this example would be removed from the producing unit with 3 wells. It's now not producing. When drilling occurs, maybe, we don't know when that'll be, maybe there's only going to be 1 well drilled. So now you went from 30 acres with royalties from 3 wells to waiting years, finally getting royalties, but only from 1 well. Let's make it even more fun. Let's stack it. Let's say those 30 acres that you were getting royalties from, where in your original unit was only 500 acres in size. So you had a nice chunk of property in a unit with 3 producing wells. Now you sign, you allow your property, because hopefully because you just didn't understand and you didn't get assistance, which we can change. So you sign, now you get 30 acres removed where you were getting royalties, and say the new unit that they put you in, again, hypothetical, say instead of you having 30 acres and a 500-acre unit with 3 wells that are all producing, say they take your 30 acres, and what if they put it in a 700-acre unit, and then again, only 1 well producing? So, yeah, maybe you're getting some royalties now, but your good chance, assuming the wells are remotely similar in production, you're not getting anywhere near as much money. And you don't know when there's going to be a second or third well drilled. These are a lot of variables and unknowns, but we look at what the known factors are. We look at what we do know. We look at how many wells there are. We look at where your property is located. We look at the configuration of the current unit. We look at what is the proposed configuration of any new units. Are there wells drilled in the new units? What type of status are there permitted wells for the new unit or units? If not, these are all factors that we're looking at and saying, boy, why would you do this? This is a great example where some landowners who get this letter who says, hey, we want to conform or we want to change this unit and we want you to sign this consent to conform or reform, the unit, hey, it makes perfect sense. It's a nice little opportunity, and it will result in you getting more money. And it's a good deal. So yes, after looking at it, this is a clear choice for my earlier example, the guy with 50 acres that's going to continue to have 50 acres in a unit, who's going to continue to get royalties from 3 wells, but for him or her, the unit that they're in is actually going to shrink, so they even have a larger share of the royalties or of the unit itself. So they have 50 acres instead of a 500-acre unit. My example, now they have 50 acres in a 450-acre unit. So they're actually going to end up getting more royalties in this deal. Great for them. However, their exact neighbor could have the total opposite effect. That person could sign the consent to reform unit and see all or a portion of their property removed from a producing unit. Again, I give an example of 3 wells of production. You could be removing your property, and then you might not see royalties for the property you removed for several years, and when there are royalties, they may be far less than what you were receiving because maybe less wells are going to be drilled. Maybe the unit is going to be bigger, so there could be less wells in a larger unit, which means you would get a lower share of the royalties because of, if nothing else, production alone, given that it's being shared with a much larger unit. For that individual, the question becomes, why would you sign? And the answer is, you shouldn't. You shouldn't. Why would you do it? Well, you should not do it. But you got this letter. Seems like, oh, yeah, we're going to have a smaller environmental footprint, drilling technologies, great deal for you. No, it's not a great deal for you. In fact, it is a terrible, horrible, horrific deal for you. Great deal for your neighbor, bad deal for you. How do we present it? We stop signing documents. We get assistance. We understand it is a very difficult thing to evaluate this. But the good news is it can be evaluated, and many times there are very clear answers. You just need to identify what you need to look at. And as a landowner, it's going to be extremely difficult to do that because this is a complicated situation. It's complicated for lawyers. It's complicated for anybody. But how does it become less complicated? By experience and understanding. So again, you can always call me. I do initial reviews, consultations. We talk about these things. We identify the variables. We identify the constants. We look at what do we need to be looking at? How is this going to affect you? What are the pros and cons for you to sign this agreement? Not your neighbor, for you. Specific advice for you. But again, if you don't call me, call somebody, but stop signing these documents. You get the letter in the mail, sign this, return it. And by the way, here's a self-addressed stamped envelope. Don't sign the document. Get assistance. You can always call us 570-307-0702. In these cases, I think both of them took, I'm going to talk about the second case in a minute, 2 hours or less. And the decisions were very easy for these people. But I'll tell you, had their neighbor or a guy down the road call, the evaluation would have been totally different. So you got to look at your specific situation, and you need to get specific advice for you. You're listening to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. We're going to talk now about the second example that I have about a company. This one was sent out by an independent landman to a landowner enclosing documents, and again saying, hey, here, sign these, they're going to be good. So here we go on letter number 2. So what I find is interesting here, it is by an independent landman to a landowner. Now, in this particular case, I'll tell you that this involves the Friendsville oil and gas lease. Big-time lease, game changer, northeastern Pennsylvania. It was entered into with Fortuna, the company, which then becomes Talisman, and Talisman owns these leases. But many other companies own these leases now by way of assignment, things of that nature. They sell, they assign, they switch, they swap. So these leases, these Friendsville leases, are owned by many different companies now. And if you have a Friendsville lease, you know this. However, again, you may say, I don't have a Friendsville lease. Let me shut off the station, go listen to some rock and roll. No, it doesn't just stop there. This is an example of, again, receiving letters in the mail, and when you're asked to just sign or, hey, this is a great deal for you, get assistance. Stop signing, get assistance. So here's the letter again. It's from, and I'm going to paraphrase, I'm going to read it verbatim. So it's from an independent landman, but interesting, right at the top in bold, all capital letters is the name of the gas company. So again, this is a representative who's representing, says REP for representation, I believe, the name of this particular company. So again, here it is, the company employee, the company independent contractor, the company agent saying, hey, here you go, sign this document. So here it is. And again, this kills me. It just kills me. Who's it addressed to? Is it addressed to the property owner? Say, Dear Mr. Clark, or whoever owns the property? No. It's addressed to Dear Company, the name of the company, royalty owner. So pretend this isn't the company. Say it was Exxon. So it says, Dear Exxon, royalty owner. So that's an example. It says, my name is such and such, and I'm an independent landman contracted by this company. You will find enclosed 2 copies of an amendment to your Friendsville lease. Please review the content of this amendment and all, and if you wish to discuss how this affects you, I'm sorry, that's so funny. Look, I make mistakes sometimes, but it says, please review the content of this amendment and all, instead of and call, and all if you wish to discuss how this affects you. 1 copy will need to be signed, notarized, and returned. Again, red flags everywhere. You're surrounded by red flags. I am a notary. If it's any trouble to get to a notary, please call. The other copy is for you to keep for your records. The amendment references the following clauses of your lease. And then it goes through, in this case, it's amending Clause 5B. And it's saying we're going to delete the entire Clause 5B and replace it with this new language. All right, due to time constraints, I'm not going to get into the new language, but we're going to get to the next part where it says, in addition, due to the market conditions beyond the industry's control, the company is requesting a change to the time frame to complete minimum obligation wells requirement, which is also contained in 5B and currently set at 5 years. Okay, let me explain that. So these Friendsville leases say something, again, to the effect of, company has 5 years to drill a well. Once they drill a well, then they have to drill 3 more horizontal wells within 5 years. So it's a minimum well obligation requirement. They must keep drilling. So what do they want to do? They want to say, instead of us as a company having to drill 3 more wells in 5 years from the date we started the first well, we want to extend that. So instead of having to drill 3 wells in 5 years, we have to drill 3 wells in 12 and a half years. So we want to buy more time to drill wells. Remember, you are part of a group, or you negotiated this lease. You entered into the lease because you wanted wells drilled in a certain time frame. You can sure bet if the market changed and the companies were doing better, they're not going to come back to you and say, hey, we want to give you some more royalty, or we want to do some things for you. I talk about the down market being opportunities. Well, this is a great example. I'll explain what I mean after I get back from this break. You're listening to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. I'll be right back. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. Jumping right into it. Got a lot to cover here last segment. So, okay, this letter sent to a client with the Friendsville lease. Remember, it doesn't just apply to only people with Friendsville leases. When you get letters from companies or from landmen saying, here, sign and return, my strong advice is don't sign and return. Get information, understand, get assistance. Another great example. In this case, what the company wants to do is, for no money, for no consideration, for nothing, no benefit to you as a landowner as far as signing this document, we're going to do such and such. We're not going to increase your royalty. We're not going to give you more money. We're not going to give you anything for signing. What we want to do is extend the amount of time. In your original lease, we would have to drill 3 more wells into your unit within 5 years, because that's what was negotiated in the lease with the gas company. But the gas company now doesn't want to do that. So they say, okay, we want to have, instead of drilling the requirement to drill 3 wells in 5 years, we want to push it out to drill 3 wells in 12 and a half years. As a landowner, look, maybe you're 18 years old, but a lot of my clients aren't 18 years old. Do you want to wait another 7.5 years until you get your wells drilled? Do you want to do that? Most people are not going to want to do that. So what do you need to do then? Well, it's not that simple. It's not that simple, because this is another example where this request is something that you may actually want to sign. And by not signing, you would be making potentially a major mistake. However, there are many people who are getting this letter that by signing would be making, in my opinion, a major mistake. So, some people not signing, making a major mistake. Some people signing, making a major mistake. What's that tell us? We need to know, in your specific situation, should you sign? Not your neighbor, but you. Because literally, you and your neighbor could have exact opposite conclusions to whether if you sign or if he or she signs. Your interest could be the exact opposite. You can't rely on anyone else's advice. You need your own advice. And you don't want to rely on the landman. Why? Here it comes. They work for the company, not you, the landowner. Get good quality advice for you, because you may be making an enormous mistake. You're listening to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. So what do I mean you're making a big mistake? You may be. Okay, here's the deal. If Here's what this lease says, and this is what's critical, and it gets very complicated. The lease essentially says that, okay, what if you don't sign? That's what we're going to look at. Well, the lease says that if the company fails to meet their minimum well requirements, meaning they do not drill enough wells, they don't completely drill out like they have to, they don't drill the additional 3 wells in 5 years as required by the lease. Well, what happens? Well, the lease says you look at the wells that are drilled, and the company has to create a unit, shrink it down, and create a unit that surrounds that well with a maximum acreage in the unit of 140 acres. So if they don't comply, they have to shrink the unit. Well, shrinking the unit could be an outstanding result for some people. For who? Well, for the people who are located above the well that's drilled. If their property is located above the well that's drilled, this may be something that's very attractive to them, especially if maybe you only have 10 acres and it's sitting smack dab on top of where the well is drilled. So if the company shrinks the unit, and so you're looking at a long rectangle, only including 140 acres. And if we can tell by estimating, clearly your 10 acres would stay in that unit, you very well may love the idea of the company shrinking the unit to 140 acres, a well is drilled there, and all of your property is in that unit. That may be something that's very attractive to you. But remember, this is just one example, and we're giving hypotheticals here. But also, imagine this. Say that there's 2 wells drilled and there's a big unit. Say it's 640 acres. I hate to use that example. 600 acres, say. That it's a big unit and your property is within the unit, but where the wells are drilled, they're nowhere close to your property. So if the company fails to meet their minimum well obligation and they're required to change the big 600 unit and shrink it into units not exceeding 140 acres, so there's only going to be units that are very long rectangles hovering close to where the well is drilled, and the maximum size is only 140 acres. That's what's required in the lease. Well, if you're not going to be a part of that shrunken 140 acre unit, well, you may not want to sign. And in a lot of cases, you probably don't want to sign. And why do you probably not want to sign? Because when they shrink the unit to only surround the wells that are drilled, your property would not be in that shrunken unit, which then means your property would actually come out of lease. It would no longer be leased. Well, a lot of cases, that's a really good thing. But here, if you have a Friendsville lease, you have a 20% royalty, you have some other really nice terms in this lease, you may not want it, and you probably do not want it to expire. You want to keep your lease alive because you like 20% royalty. And new leases now may only be 15% royalty, maybe lower, maybe a little higher, but you like your current lease and you don't want it to die. So in this hypothetical situation, which is a very real potential situation, that landowner probably wants to sign. However, his neighbor, who's close or a couple of properties over, who's directly above the well bore, especially if they don't have a lot of acreage, they may say, this is the last thing I want to do is sign this. So you need to look at your specific situation. Look at your specific situation. Even more interesting, actually, in these cases, the company probably needs a lot of people to sign. One of them, I think I counted up about probably 20 landowners that would be impacted. Now, they all may not have the same lease, but 20 that would be impacted. And in some cases, just one person signing can eliminate the company's ability to extend the leases like they're requesting in this case. So if that 10-acre landowner says, hey, I'm not signing because my property is right above the well bore, that could result in, regardless of whether the other guy signs or not, his or her property being released. Gets very complicated. You need specific advice for your specific situation. All right, we're going to have to leave it there, but I'm going to leave you with this. Stop signing. Get assistance. And have a great week.